What happens to a child where the attachment need is not compatible with the need for authenticity? In other words, if I'm authentic, my parents will reject me. If I feel what I feel and express what I feel and insist on my own truth, my parents can't handle it. And parents convey those messages unconsciously all the time. Not because they mean to, not because they don't love the child, not because they're not trying to do their best, but because they themselves are suppressed or traumatized or hurt or stressed. And what does the child do with that? Well, if I give up my attachment for the sake of authenticity, I lose my relationships on which my life depends. Therefore, there's no question. What becomes suppressed is our authenticity, our emotions. And then we become 25 and 30 or 35, 40, and we don't know who we are.
That is a common challenge today. How many people reach a midlife crisis and don't know who they are? That was me exactly. So there are a lot of examples out there in the world of adults who are overly attached to a tribe or a group identity, and they have no capacity to speak authentically from themselves. And I have a great video I'm going to share in a minute from a famous client activist who in her 30s and then became a parent, self-reflected, was open to more science, did more research on her own, and left the movement and became a healthy individual. She had finally reparented herself and had individuated. And now I'm going to share a Dr. Andrew Huberman clip that's going to go into what happens more when we rely on the outside world to regulate our emotions as opposed to the inside world. When we're over attached to external forces as opposed to inner authority. So let's check him out.
Is start to figure out how we can, I think, especially for the next generation of kids, how to teach them to regulate their nervous system so that they recognize that pulse of adrenaline as placing them in a compromised position. Like, we have to leverage the idea that being able to hear and listen hinges on the ability to be calm. So therefore, the ability to be calm is crucial to hearing and listening is crucial to our advancement as individuals and as groups. The problem is everyone's been trying to do this backwards. They've said we all have to get along. We have to cancel culture. We all have to, listen to one another. And I think, again, we have to start from the inside. We have to teach it physiologically. Now, I don't have a master plan on how to do that, but one of the reasons I'm here and one of the reasons I'm, teaching neuroscience on Instagram and not just in my laboratory is until we can learn to regulate the self, I don't think we're going to get where we want to go as a culture. What we need to do.
It's been my experience that changing the world is an inside job, and science proves that we live in a holographic universe, that the universe is a mirror. So our internal reality is projected externally so we can see ourselves. And then we have an opportunity to self-reflect and change internally so we can have a different projection externally. So if we cancel things on the outside, how does that truly change the inside? Like he was saying, does canceling things on the outside create healthy grown adults who can have a mature conversation? Because that hasn't been my experience, but maybe you've experienced something differently. So I'm encouraging you to self-reflect. I'm Carrie Blazer, the Divine Feminine. My soul's name is Sophia, and I'm sharing my free ebook, my 6 Divine Feminine Self-Love Strategies, linked below. They are Appreciate, Learn, and Forgive, Love Hierarchy, Learn to Surf the Waves of Life, The Universe is a Mirror, Changing the World is an Inside Job, and Pain is an Initiation Process for Personal Growth. Why? Well, I'm going to lean on Rumi. Rumi said, you have to break your heart to open your heart, because the wound is where the light shines in for healing purposes, and then you have to break your heart to expand your emotional range and grow into a healthy adult. It's not a painless process, because pain is beautiful. It shows us what needs to be healed. So let's get to this video. And after the video, I'm going to explain, based on the laws of physics, cardiology, neuroscience, why the universe is a mirror, and then get into why change is an inside job, which I know those two go together. Let me share my screen again. Oh, Confessions of a Former Climate Activist. She worked with Greta Thunberg. I mean, one of the most famous climate activists. And she has taken the time to self-reflect, and I respect her for that. Like, well done.
Lucy Biggers, head of social media at the Free Press and former climate activist. Thank you for being here today. We're going to talk about why you joined the climate movement, why you left, and what gave you the courage to do so.
Thank you so much for having me.
Today, we're going to talk about how you went from being a leader really in the climate movement to now being one of its most outspoken critics. So before I knew the Free Press, Lucy, you were fighting to ban plastic straws and you were, homies with AOC.
Hey, Lucy, I hear you're doing a video on the Green New Deal and I'm thrilled.
What happened?
We attract what we are through energetic resonance. The universe is a mirror. So if she's in the same tribe as AOC, and then she's changed to become more emotionally mature, what does that tell you about AOC? Something to reflect on.
To you, how did you get into that movement in the first place?
Yeah, so I spent half of my 20s really in the climate movement, and it started about when I was 25. I'm 35 now, so I know I look younger, right?
You do really give a lot of Gen Z energy, which we're going to talk about.
Oh yeah, I'm a fake I cosplay as Gen Z, but I'm actually 35, so that's important to know the timing. So in 2015, I was 25, and I worked at this newsroom called Now This News, and I was a video producer there, so I was scrolling all the time on Facebook. And sort of the beginning of like the scrolling that we know now. And my algorithm was just feeding me up environmental stories. And I just kind of got bought into the climate movement narrative. Some of the things that first got me into it were just documentaries. Before the Flood, which is a Leonardo DiCaprio film, which now why do I trust Leonardo DiCaprio on this topic? But I watched that. Josh Fox is a big climate activist who's done films like Gasland, which now I know are very biased. So it was the documentaries, and then even in my feed, seeing this thing called the Dakota Access Pipeline protest, which was really big in 2016. And activists would comment, cover Dakota Access Pipeline, cover Dakota Access Pipeline. And so I started covering this protest against a pipeline that was being built in North Dakota. The whole year of 2016, I did that. And that was really like when I first got into the movement. And then over the years after that, I built up my social media following on Instagram, covering things like the Green New Deal, interviewing Greta.
What are the personal choices that you make to be more environmentally friendly?
Always like being down on single-use plastics, all the normal ideas that you think of when it comes to like the climate movement. That is what I was pushing. And at the peak of it, I had 50,000 followers on Instagram, which I say it's like follower inflation because that's not that much now. But in 2016, or this is like maybe now 2018, that was a lot. And yeah, so I kind of just gained a persona. I got a lot of support for that. And next thing you know, I'm just like a gung-ho climate activist pushing all these ideas.
So part of being, as you know, an influencer, especially in political spaces, is that it kind of becomes your identity.
Right.
I wonder why you're absorbing this information,
Right.
You're reporting on it. What kind of led you to say, you know what, I'm gonna like make this my life really, and attach my face, my reputation to kind of pushing this movement forward?
Yeah. So in the 2010s, climate change was not a topic that was covered by the news a lot. It was a very undercovered story. And so I saw an opening where I could really be of service to these other activists who were talking and raising the alarm bells about this and cover it. And so I felt like I was on the side of justice where, the scientists are saying the world's going to end in 10 years. Why is nobody talking about this? Like, I'm going to start talking about it. And also, I will say at that time, I was very, very left wing. And so I was very progressive, and my whole newsroom was like that too. So we were all like Bernie supporters. And like, this is why the 2010s, it's like really important to put yourself in that mindset of what that ideology was like at the time. And now when I reflect on it, I think it was this desire to like do good in the world. Like I wanted to make an impact. And I thought I could be of service. And at the same time, a lot of this ideology that we know now really well, like kind of the woke stuff and the oppressor versus oppressed mindset, was coming into my newsroom. So now it was not just like, oh, I'm a Bernie supporter and I want free college. It was like, oh, if you have white privilege, you need to sit down. Like if you're a cis person, you need to sit down.
There's the projection. I feel guilty for my white, perceived white privilege. So I'm going to project that onto you to control you. Does she have authenticity in that environment, or is it authoritarian? Because that's the environment that says Trump is authoritarian and the universe is a mirror and we project out through the vortex of our hearts. So what's really true?
And so I'm in my mid 20s looking around the newsroom going, well, I've got a lot of privilege.
Yeah.
And so when I'm seeing at the same time these Native Americans saying there's a Dakota Access Pipeline going on our reservation and it's evil and we need help fighting it, I'm like, great, I can be a really great ally. And so psychologically, in retrospect, looking back, I think it was this desire to like atone for my privileged position that I had in the world. And the way I could atone was by
She needed to atone, and she projected that onto other people and then held them accountable for it, as opposed to redirecting that back to self. And that's what you would do if you accepted that you live in a holographic universe, that the universe is a mirror. And I understand this is new wisdom. I get it. I mean, it's been out there, but it's not general among the populace. Well, the Mayans can tell us why. They did their calendars really well, and they calculated time cycles really accurately. Well, the time cycle ended in 2012. We heard, oh, Mayan calendar says end of world. No, end of time cycle. The new time cycle that started in 2012 is the time of self-healing. Before, you went to somebody else, codependent, external authority source. But now the internal authority source, the inner authority, because we live in a holographic universe, is where it's at. Self-love creates heaven on earth. Heaven is not external to where we're at. We create it together by learning to love ourselves, like she did.
Popping up these narratives. So it was very emotional driven as well, and like psychologically driven. And then black and white thinking, where it was like the Native Americans in this fighting this pipeline are the good guys, and the fossil fuels and the American government and just capitalism in general are the bad guys. And so a lot of that was happening at the subconscious level. But that is, I think, what first drew me to it. And I kind of like took it on as an armor. And it gave me a lot of accolades within the group of my colleagues and in the movement, where it was like, wow, she's such a great ally. She's doing so good.
Yeah. I wonder, in addition to the social rewards, which we'll talk more about, and I think is really common, what were kind of like in that time for you the biggest wins? Like whether there were policy changes or people you got to meet or reforms that were made in that moment, what were the things that you were like, wow, I helped make this happen and I'm so happy I did?
I mean, I keep talking about Dakota Access Pipeline, and I don't know if people watching this would know what it is, but it was like the topic of the time.
I remember it.
Yeah, it was right before Trump got elected. Yeah, you were like 6. But it was right before Trump got elected. So like this was like the beginning of kind of the modern era that I think we think about now with the Trump derangement syndrome and everything. And so this was actually happening Obama's last year. And I guess I keep bringing that up because that was a huge win for me, because I got that issue to have 100 million views on Facebook, the videos that I did. So like there were activist Facebook groups that were getting like 0 views, and I would put them on the Now This page and they would get 100 million views. And there was a point when like Shailene Woodley went up at an environmental rewards show and she said, go to Standing Rock.
Don't just tweet about it. Don't just feed off of me getting arrested. Go to Standing Rock.
I made that go viral. It got tens of millions of views like in a day, and like people went to Standing Rock, which was insane. I went to Standing Rock. There was a snowstorm. It's on a reservation. Like I slept on the floor of a casino when I was there, because like it was insane. But like we all went, and it was just like anything that we've now seen these movements many times, pro-Palestine, BLM, this sort of very emotionally driven black and white thinking movement. And that's what the climate movement was in the 20 teens, and the way that we saw it with BLM in 2020 and then like pro-Palestine since 2023. And so, yeah, that was like the example of it. And I just got,
I'm going to give an example from my family. It's now early 2026, and in 2025, we had a lot of immigration raids. And my older daughter was like really into the immigration and fighting against the immigration. Look, they're tearing the child away from the mother. I'm like, why are you so attracted to that? You know, we attract what we are. The universe is a mirror. And then I reminded her, do you think that you might be attracted to that because of your own trauma? That I almost died when she was 5 weeks old and spent 2 weeks in the hospital on a ventilator? And that she internalized that as my mom's dead or my mom's gone. It's a primal wound as an infant. And these people that black and white, that's the triggering, right? But when you start to self-reflect, you realize that your triggers are your healing friend and not your healing foe, because they'll show you your emotional wounds. Carl Jung always said, what irritates you about others will always lead you to an understanding of yourself. The universe is a mirror.
Swept up into it, and it became part of my identity.
At the peak of this movement, I wonder if you can just tell us what like the core tenets of thinking were.
Yeah. So the core tenets would be that the world's going to end in 10 years unless we basically keep fossil fuels in the ground. It's American imperialist capitalism's fault. And all of the politicians who aren't doing anything, they don't care. They're bought out by fossil fuel industry. Anyone who raises a question of questioning the narrative, they're a fossil fuel shill.
Again, is that authoritative? Is that totalitarian?
Or they're paid off. And so it's not just like we have to save the planet, but it's that the systems that we operate in now are inherently evil. And if we just got rid of them, we could live in a utopia where everyone would be living peacefully off of the land and we would have harmony. And, you know, so it's, again, like very weird.
The warmth of collectivism.
Yes, it's warm, but yeah, there's like a lot of like communist and Marxist undertones, which I think is intentional by the people who are organizing it. But I am just a useful idiot at the time and kind of just going along with it. And again, like when you get pulled into a movement like this, you start off by being like, yeah, I don't want plastic in a turtle's nose, to next thing being like, down with the West. And you're like, how did I get here? I don't know. But like, I was drawn in by the emotions of it. And now 2 years later, I'm like pushing the Green New Deal with AOC that says like, every American deserves a job and we need no more fossil fuels, and things that if they actually got enacted would be devastating.
Like you referenced with Israel-Palestine, like with BLM, a kind of defining feature of all of these movements is one, a sense of like nihilism, but also a lack of questioning.
Mm-hmm.
And people who question things are often demonized. And I wonder if you can first talk about like if there were people when you were kind of on the in crowd that started to question things that were maybe ostracized, or if you ever had a moment where you said, this is starting to get a little bit freaky for me.
I don't think I ever saw other people questioning it. I think that every time I would step out of line, if I would say something like, well, this doesn't really make sense, you know, when you say it among people who are true believers, I would then go home and spiral. My anxiety would spiral and they go, oh my God, I would think, am I not a good ally because I said that plastic has a lower carbon footprint?
So she starts to self-reflect, and then her first, am I a good ally? External locus of control, setting up for a codependent mindset, suppression of your authenticity for participation, attachment to a group. As Dr. Gabor Mate said in the beginning, that's not emotionally healthy.
And glass, you know, which is a fact, you know, and so there'd be inconvenient facts. And if they were brought up in certain contexts, I would just feel so insecure leaving like a situation where I might have said something outside of the party line. And mind you, everyone was like actually lovely and nice. And this was like a self-inflicted thing. It's not like people were like putting a gun to my head being like, push climate stuff. You know, it was literally a self-imposed thing and ideology. And I look back on it and I think that my sense of self was sitting on sand. And so it was just so would go with the winds of the group.
And the reason that happens is when we have fear, guilt, and shame in our hearts from a traumatic childhood, we don't want to be in our heart. So our hearts close down and our minds get overactivated and we start dreaming of being someplace else. Utopia, communism, perfect heaven. Because the heart is closed down. The heart's well, I don't want to be there. Well, I'm over here, but I'm over here. And I start looking in there. Oh, that I don't want to be there. I'm going to be over here. Lack of a sense of self. Lack of a secure attachment to self. Right now, 40 to 60% of kids do not have a secure attachment to self. They have the same challenges she has. And 40 to 60% of adults have the same challenges. So we have to learn how to love ourselves, how to self-reflect.
And so I didn't have a solidness inside of myself of what are my core tenet beliefs. And so I just was told, well, you know, capitalism is evil and we're all going to die from climate change unless we do something now. And I'm like, okay, like I'm going to buy this. And I didn't have the confidence in myself to question it and go against the group. And so whenever I came up with an idea that was contradictory, I would just dismiss it.
At this time, there were people who
Cancel culture. If it doesn't fit the narrative, get it away from me. This is my narrative. This is my narrative. And then we get very stuck individuals who are very busy being right, and then they don't take the time to self-reflect, and when you self-reflect, you can learn that the universe is a mirror and that our hearts project how we feel about ourselves outward through our heart as a vortex, so that we can see ourselves for self-improvement opportunities. It's a constant feedback loop for self-improvement.
who even quietly were saying like, hey, like, I actually am not so sure if this is true. The science maybe points to other things. How were those people talked about within the movement?
I don't think those people are even acknowledged or talked about. That stuff never broke through. And even now in my research that I do continually in reading books, I'll learn about something and go, oh, that study that I thought was true, 97% of scientists agree that climate change is a problem. Like, that has been so thoroughly discredited, but it never broke through to me, because again, like, anyone who questioned it is like a white privileged nut. Like, the white privilege thing is like, you can't kind of separate it. Because again, if like there was a scientist who say their identity is like a white man, they'd be like, classic white man, like trying to hold up the system.
So it really wasn't, even though it's a scientific movement, it really was completely divorced from science at all.
I never looked up the science of it, which is so embarrassing. I didn't know what percentage of the atmosphere was CO2 until like 2019. And that was when and it's 0.04%, by the way, which is like not a lot, which I think is like a good thing you should know. And again, like, all these people that I followed were activists, documentary films, and I would just watch that one thing and take it as fact, and then never question it until years and years later.
So you're deeply ensconced in this. And then when is the first time, that you kind of look around and think something is going on here and I need to learn more? And then really, how do you make the quite courageous decision, especially as your kind of identity, public identity, is tied to this thing, to start questioning?
So I think that the whole time I was part of the movement, I always had doubts. And again, because I'm saying my internal sense of self is like built on sand. So I would get really triggered or have anxiety when someone would bring something up that might make me question the foundations of these beliefs around the climate. So I always would have doubts. And even like we were talking about Dakota Access Pipeline, a few months after that happened, I remember, having a few glasses of wine with people like at my apartment and kind of being like, it's kind of bullshit. I think I felt when I was covering the Dakota Access Pipeline that I was in the role of an advocate for the climate activists and the Native American activists perspective. And so I pushed that message, which was that this pipeline is invasive on our land and it's going to destroy our drinking water, and that it can't go through because of climate change. It was just the party line of the activists, even though inside I could see that there was a lot of problems with the argument. For one, the fact that when you transport oil over a pipeline, it's actually safer and better for the environment than doing it over trains, because trains can crash. They have a carbon footprint themselves. And I would go onto the website of like the pipeline website, and I could see they would like drew a graph and explained how it was going to go under the river and it would not leak into the drinking water. And so I would see the nuance, but I almost felt like that wasn't my role to show it. I have a forward-facing persona. This is what I'm meant to say and do. And even if I see counter information, it's too much of a headache to even include that. Like,
right.
So why would I even go down that line? Because then people are going to be questioning me of my loyalty to the cause.
Was there a moment before, though, when you really did think all of this was true?
I could tell even the way I was covering stories, but I wasn't covering them honestly or fully. Like, it would almost be like an iceberg, and I would show the tip of the iceberg, and below the iceberg, there'd be nuance and complexity, or maybe part of it that would throw cold water on the theory that I was pushing around this stuff. And I would just ignore it. And I remember always kind of feeling like my coverage is so one-sided, and it kind of hurt my heart a little bit. But again, the cost of going against the group and trying to think of standing on my own, I was like, whoa, that's too much to bear. So I'm just going to put my trust in the group, even though I'm seeing these contradictions. Other people know more than me. So like, I'll just go
Was
with
the
it.
calculus like, I'm a vehicle for this movement, and therefore I can only show the tip of the iceberg that they deem acceptable, because doing otherwise would ostracize me? Or did you still fundamentally believe that, like, yes, there's all this other stuff that I'm not portraying in what I'm putting out there, but it's kind of a distraction from the ultimate end, which is like creating an awareness or
Right.
momentum behind this.
I think that's what it is. And I think that activists still do this, right? It's like we don't have time for nuance. We just have to push for the most extreme narrative because this is a fire alarm situation and the planet is going to be destroyed. So like we don't have time to think about the downsides of solar and wind. Like we have to just keep pushing forward because this is existential. And so I subscribe to that where I'm like, this is an existential threat and we don't have time to like look at the details. Like, like.
So is fear mongering authoritarian? Fascist? We get a lot of those complaints from the left.
We just have to get people to care and to be afraid. And because if they're afraid, they're going to change their habits. But again, like the logical thinking was not there. Psychologically, I was in such an insecure place with the group think and being in that my work environment, the activist environment, that I didn't use my logical thinking to the end. I would always stop thinking and then give up my autonomy to the group, which was saying, this is a existential thing. Don't ask questions.
So when does this small hint of doubt or you slipping something at like a drunk wine night turn into this complete breakup?
So the timeline is that I was at Now This from 2015 to 2021. And so I was there through the COVID stuff too. And I was visible. I was an on-camera person the whole time I was there. So the whole world shut down at the peak of COVID. It was something like 17%. We saw a 17% reduction in our carbon emissions, the peak of COVID. So that's like just like those 2 weeks. Over the year, it ends up being something like 5% reduction. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, the climate movement wants 100% reduction in our carbon emissions. What is it going to expect of our society?
Yeah, we're literally locked in our homes, not doing anything.
And we still have carbon emissions. And so that was the first moment where I go, hold on. I don't know if I want to live in a world where we have zero carbon emissions because I'm kind of depressed right now at home. This sucks and we have no freedoms. And so what does the climate movement, if you take it to its logical conclusion, it's not going to be no big deal. Like it's going to require people to give up their freedoms to like lower carbon emissions. And so that was one thing. And then the other thing was I was very anti-plastic and all of a sudden like the PPEs everywhere, the masks, the plastic barriers between every table at a restaurant and when you're checking out your food at the grocery store. And I'm like, wait a minute, I've been sweating about a single-use plastic straw for the past 5 years. And now we've proliferated more plastic in the last few months than I've seen in my lifetime. And also looking around, we seem like we're fine. It looks like our society was able to absorb that plastic and the world has not ended. And so that was 2020. And then I left. In 2021, I left my job. And so I didn't really say anything publicly while I was still there because I was in a public role. Then I was at a nonprofit for a year in another behind the scenes role before I came to the Free Press. And then I came to the Free Press end of 2022. I'm behind the scenes now, 2.5 years. And I just started making content this past May. And that was the reason why I went from being behind the scenes that whole time was I was like, I'm too afraid. And then my younger son turned 1 in April. And that was when it coincided where I kind of had a light bulb come back on. And I was like, wait a minute, like, let me reconsider this. Do I really want to go to my grave never talking about the climate stuff that I have issues with? And like,
I'm going to stop it there. I'll link this below. And she ends on a really amazing point. Being a mother has a completely different perspective than being a single woman. Because now you have children out there and they're extensions of you. And is that where I want them to be? So different parts of us turn on so we can recognize patterns in different ways. And we're just biologically, like giving birth biologically changes a woman. And then you have an innocent infant in front of you. They're screaming. They can't be wrong. You have to be wrong. The amount of self-reflection you do as a parent is immense. And now, due to multiple reasons, people aren't having kids. And we wonder, what are all the reasons we don't have mature adults in society? Well, that's one of them. Okay, now I'm going to share the 2 pieces of wisdom and how those work in more detail. The universe is a mirror and changing the world is an inside job because they go together. Because if the universe is a mirror, we live in a holographic universe. How do you change the hologram? Change the inside, change where the projection comes from. So let's start there with this presentation. Okay, let's start at the left with the laws of physics and the map of consciousness levels from Dr. David R. Hawkins. And you'll notice that these are all emotions. shame, guilt, grief, fear, enlightenment. And I didn't know enlightenment was an emotion until I found this, until after I experienced enlightenment on my own. It was there in my recliner for 3 days, vibrating super high. The first morning I heard enlightenment, enlightenment, enlightenment. I'm like, oh my gosh, right? And so a lot of stuff happened, and it's in my book. If you want to check it out, my book is linked below on Amazon. But I had to explain to my kids why I'd acted so crazy. I received profound wisdom. I faced catastrophic fears. It is the most transformative emotion. The fastest moving energy is the most transformative energy. So the more people that work on themselves, that transform their wounds to wisdom, expand their emotional range to include enlightenment, then they naturally help other people. And I'm going to show that when we talk about changing the world as an inside job. Just, give it a minute to think about that. And learning to surf the waves of life means learning to surf your emotions, to go down into your fear, guilt, and shame, taking you into your subconscious, your shadow, turning your wound into wisdom, and that allowing it to the next mountaintop. Because when you go based on the laws of physics, we all have energy bodies, so laws of physics apply. When we surrender, that's the feminine, to our emotions, then we gain kinetic energy, momentum, propulsion to catapult us to the next mountaintop. But when we're stuck in our emotions, seeking validation externally because we have an external locus of control, we're super codependent, like she was talking about, we don't move through our emotions and we stay stuck. And we don't expand our emotional range and we stay immature. And then we blame everybody else for our problems. And we're actually authoritarian because we're authoritarian over our own emotions, suppressing, controlling. That's where you get super controlling people because they don't process their own emotions and they're projecting that externally. And so how they present in society is controlling because inside they're controlling. Our external reality reflects our internal reality. The universe is a mirror, showing me myself in every moment as a constant feedback loop for self-improvement. So here we're going to watch this physics experiment and see how it really works. As you notice, the 512 hertz and the 440 hertz are not an energetic match. They do not resonate. So when 500 hertz moves, the 440 doesn't. The 512 moves, the 440 is just stable. But what happens when you put 440 and 440? Let's see. There's the movement. So this is how it works. Well, let's say I have in my soul selfishness that resonates at 40 hertz. When my selfishness moves, that will trigger other people's selfishness, an energetic match. We attract what we are. Rumi says, what you seek seeks you. Same wisdom, same thing. When something is true, it's true in multiple places. So when you perceive selfishness outside of yourself, that is your soul showing you your own selfishness. When you perceive beauty outside of yourself, that is your soul showing you your own beauty. So now let's look at the physics experiment that I have that shows us why changing the world is an inside job. And that's changing the energy. And I'll go on for a second. So that is also supported by the field of epigenetics. Epi means before, and genetics we know. So what happens before genetics? Einstein will tell us. The field is the sole governing agency of the particle. The 5D controls the 3D. The field is the energy. The particle is the body. So the energy comes out of the heart, communicates up to the brain, and the brain releases chemicals. Starts in the soul, out through the heart. The nervous system in the heart is far more complex than the brain and sends far more signals to the brain than the other way around. And that mirrors feminine and masculine. The feminine surrenders, the masculine acts, right? Like women used to drop a handkerchief and the man would decide what to do. Women go first. It's in us. So it comes out of our hearts, heart and soul. So we're going to rely on two quotes. The Einstein quote, the field is the sole governing agency of the particle, and a Tesla quote. If you want to understand the secrets of the universe, Think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And we're about to learn in a second about what we've been taught about the heart, that it's a pump, which is an external locus of control, a Christian worldview. But that's not accurate. And we've known that for many years, yet that's not taught in school. Why? I want you to think about that as I share the first video where we learn, explains how the heart is a vortex. Oh, I'm going to have to, let me restart this. Sorry about that. Wasn't ready. Here we go.
Let me just read this because I think it's actually probably one of the best descriptions of the heart that I've ever run across. They taught you the heart was just a glorified meat pump, that it squeezes and pushes blood like some crude mechanical device, a hydraulic engine made of flesh. That is what they want you to believe, because if you buy into that primitive lie, you never ask deeper questions. But it is false. It has always been false, and the real science proves it. Dr. Francesco Torrenguas, a Spanish cardiac researcher, discovered what the textbooks refuse to acknowledge, that the heart is not a pump. He dissected thousands of hearts and found that the heart is a single continuous muscle band folded into a spiral. He proved that the heart works like a vortex generator, creating suction and torque, not pressure. He called it the helical ventricular myocardial band, and it changes everything. The real movement of the blood comes from pressure differentials, electromagnetic flow, and coherent resonance. The blood spirals naturally. It need not be forced through miles of arteries and capillaries. The so-called pump is not strong enough to push thick fluid through 60,000 miles of tubing. That is basic physics. That lie was dead on arrival. Here is the truth. Blood moves before the heart forms in the embryo. That is, by the way, a documented fact. It flows via frequency, resonance, and electric charge. The body is a field, not a factory. Your heart creates a toroidal electromagnetic field that radiates 6 meters from the body. This field syncs with the earth, the sun, and every living being around you. It is a resonator, a tuner, a conductor. It aligns the rhythm of your cells. It feels, it remembers, it emits, and it responds to emotion, thought, light, sound, and breath. When you feel love, grief, fear, or peace, your heart transmits it. It is the central frequency modulator of your biology, not a pump. And the institutions know this. The Heart Math Institute has measured these fields for decades. They know the heart has more neuronal cells than parts of the brain. They know it is a second brain. They know coherence in the heart transforms the entire nervous system. So why are they still teaching children a 400-year-old guess from William Harvey that has never been
That
updated?
is an excellent question. And I think one answer to that is we only recently, in the fall of 2025, updated the food pyramid, and it was basically inverted. The food, and that's what I found with my wounds. When I find a wound in my subconscious, like I used to fear all men, when I made it into wisdom, men protect me. And that's exactly what they saw. They inverted it. Humans need fat for proper neurological development. So if you want to keep people immature and under control, don't develop their neurology. Because what is the reparenting process? What is the healing process? It's the process of recalibrating your energy body, your soul, and addressing the fear, guilt, and shame that you internalized from your childhood. You were unaware you're a child. I did it. We all do it. Our souls plan our lives based on our wounds for self-improvement opportunities. Okay, I had a very traumatic childhood, and I had to learn that the emotional box of darkness that he gave me, and I'll get into he in a second, was the gift. The gift he gave me was the process of learning how to transform my emotional wounds into personal wisdom, and now I'm here sharing it with you today. I'm the reincarnation of Mary Magdalene. I met the reincarnation of Jesus Christ when I was 5 years old. We grew up together. I haven't seen him in 40 years. I talk to his soul constantly. We're working on coming together because of all the trauma. He is currently the head of global security at GoDaddy, former FBI. I'm going to quote Carl Jung. One does not become enlightened by imagining beings of light, but by making their darkness conscious. And that's what we do. We reincarnate and we work together to make the darkness conscious. But if it's not in me, I can't do it and help the collective. It's not in him. He can't change himself and then come out and help the collective, which is what we're about to do. This is the second coming. This is the great purification. We're teaching everyone that self-love creates heaven on earth. Heaven is not external. I heard Erica Kirk in one of her campaigns say, let's make heaven crowded. Well, Christianity says the cross is the only ladder to heaven. That's an external source of authority. But how that's in direct contradiction to we live in a holographic universe. The universe is a mirror. That's the wound. Early Christians taught inner authority like Mary Magdalene. But that was repressed and replaced with external authority to mirror the nation states that were being created when Christianity was created in the 4th century. I have a master's degree in East Asian religious studies, and I'm a nerd, and I love research. I did all that research last year when I accepted all the signs and synchronicities that I'm reincarnation of Mary Magdalene. She's divine feminine. So I reincarnate all the time. That's just one of my lifetimes. That's why I say in the beginning, my soul's name is Sophia. Sophia is wisdom, opposite Christ, knowledge. JC, Jason Colvin, JC. Okay. You can check out my website if you want to see some of the signs and synchronicities, but they just happen all the time now. So let me share how a heart is formed in an embryo. Self-love creates heaven on earth. And if this isn't love, I don't know what. Like Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. I just love this one. It's so beautiful. Let me find it here. Okay, here we go. Before the heart beats for the first time, something far greater begins to move. Long before your heart ever beat, thousands of cardiac cells made a silent decision. There was no pulse, no rhythm, no sound. In the earliest stages of development, individual heart cells begin firing electrical signals on their own. They synchronize. So they're a vibrational match. The energy controls the particle and it brings them together and they form the heart, and the heart becomes a vortex. Separate impulses align into one coordinated electrical wave, like we saw in the synchronicity. Oh, did I show the synchronicity? That wave triggers the first contraction, the first heartbeat, the beginning of a rhythm that can last a lifetime. Wow, that's amazing. So I think I didn't get to changing the world is an inside job. And so let me share a physics experiment that shows that kind of synchronization that it was just talking about. This is probably why I didn't, remember at the right time. My intuition do better, inner authority. Okay. I love it when my intuition does that to me. Makes a point and I don't even know it's making a point. All right, let me back it up and make it bigger. And then we can watch it. Oh. You see the two in the middle? They are the fastest moving energy. So they're the most transformative. So the other ones align and they all come together. We attract what we are. Isn't that amazing? I just love that. I'm a nerd. All the men in my family are engineers, so I go full engineer. I have to know how it works, but that really helped me in my healing process because I wanted to understand how it works. And that's where my ebook comes in. I share my process for going from a suicide attempt to bringing out my shamanic gifts to experiencing enlightenment in just 5 years. And that's in my book, linked below. So there's a free ebook below that houses, a summary of the wisdom. And then there's a link to my book if you want to buy it on Amazon and check out my healing journey that includes Justin Waller and his best friend, Andrew Tate, 2 Fire Academy instructors who all led me back to my guy from my childhood, JC. I call him Jared in the book. In the book, I had not yet accepted that I'm the divine feminine reincarnation of Mary Magdalene. I didn't know my soul's name was Sophia yet. Was even aware of Sophia. I went east for religion. I met my ex-husband in Tibet and he's Israeli. So, another piece of the puzzle, right? So anyway, please like and subscribe. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye.